this group of 4 killers from ISIS Kherson, ISIS-K. This is the, I believe this is the Shia version of ISIS. It's named after the former name for Iran. And they're unhappy with the Sunni version of ISIS, which is, the one that we saw most of in Iraq and Afghanistan. And they've been pissed off with Russia for a long, long time. There's a lot of Muslims in Russia, particularly in Chechnya, which Russia bombed back to the States, which they're preparing now to do with Ukraine. So, they killed a bunch of people. They killed 130 some odd people and wounded many others, mourning over the weekend. But here's where it gets dangerous. This was an assault. In fact, Putin was warned about this 2 weeks ago by our government. Our government reached out to the Russian government and said, hey, you've got an attack coming. And we publicly did this. We notified American citizens through the U.S. Embassy and gatherings because a big public gathering massacre was on its way. And sure enough, there it was. But Putin, when he came out Saturday morning and made his first public pronouncement about this, blamed it on Ukraine. Instantly, the president of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky, came out and said, wasn't us. Guarantee you it wasn't us. Putin has this wrong. But Putin is continuing to say this. And then Saturday night, this is when I'm concerned about this. Saturday night, Louise and I were watching BBC News around, 8 o'clock our time, East Coast time, around 11 o'clock, or West Coast time, 11 o'clock East Coast time. And the BBC was reporting, and in fact, they showed a clip of it, that Russian television, nationwide across Russia, was playing a clip of the defense minister saying essentially, yeah, we struck this theater. I mean, he didn't use those words. He was talking, but he was talking about, this is really going to hurt Russia, that kind of thing. Now, it turns out it was an AI-generated deepfake video. And pointing out is that Russia is using a deepfake video of the Ukrainian defense minister saying that they were responsible for the Russia theater massacre in order to whip up domestic sentiment. Now, the big question is, and I write about this today in my piece at HartmannReport.com, the big question is Putin doing this because he's trying to deflect Russian public opinion away from the fact that he was warned about this 2 weeks ago? I mean, it's like George W. Bush was warned that 9/11 was coming. Remember, the CIA even, rented a private plane and flew an agent, an officer down to Crawford, Texas, to hand deliver to George W. Bush a document that said Bin Laden determined to strike in the U.S. That was August 6th in 2001. And of course, 5 weeks later? Yeah, roughly 5 weeks later, you had 9/11. But George W. Bush, when he got that memo, instead of going back to Washington and pulling together the intelligence agencies and said, let's figure out what's going to happen so we can stop it, instead, he took the longest presidential vacation in presidential history, in American history, going to Florida to presumably be out of the way of a terrorist strike. He did not want to go back to Washington, D.C. when he learned that the terrorists were going to strike D.C. And sure enough, they did. And it looks like the plane that went down in Pennsylvania had the White House as its target, or maybe Congress. But it would have been close enough that it probably would have taken out both. So anyhow, Putin could be trying to deflect attention away, just like George W. Bush used 9/11 to deflect attention away from his warning that 9/11 was coming. He used, ginning up his rhetoric about Afghanistan and Iraq. So that's one possibility. The other possibility, the one that I'm really worried about or concerned about, is that Putin is going to use this as an excuse to massively increase his attacks on Ukraine, to just start, like a massive bombing campaign and land invasion, and maybe even the use of tactical nuclear weapons, which could bring us closer to a major war in Europe, which could bring us closer to World War III. And also, my biggest concern about this is that the Republicans in the House of Representatives continue to block any U.S. aid to Ukraine. With U.S. aid to Ukraine, Zelensky can fight the Russians to a stalemate at the very least, which would provoke a negotiated, conclusion of the war. But with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Moscow Mike Johnson and Ron Johnson in the Senate and Rand Paul in the Senate and all these guys who just love to kiss Putin's ass I mean, this is clearly the Putin caucus. They want Putin to win. They want the democratic Ukraine to lose because these people are not fans of democracy. They don't believe in democracy. They're with Donald Trump. Steal an election. Go for it. Turn America into an autocracy. So my concern is that both Putin is looking at this going, hey, I've got a major victory. I mean, for what has it been, 16 months, something like that? Republicans in the House have blocked any kind of aid to Ukraine successfully. So Putin is feeling his oats, which means that the probability of war in Europe just increased dramatically. Thank you, Marjorie Taylor Greene.